To wholesale or to lend? One of the most common questions that I get asked on a day-to-day basis. And here's my answer. Neither. And both. You see, something that I've realized recently is that we don't really care how we make money. We all just have the same goal of having the freedom to do whatever the heck it is that we darn well please. Like, for example, if somebody were to give you $100 million right now, as long as it was legal, you wouldn't really care where that money came from, right? Because that would be getting you closer to your goal. So it's not as much the vessel as it is the end goal. I know, I digress a little bit. So let's get into it. Wholesaling versus lending. What do I think and how can it be helpful to you as well? Let's go. Hey guys, welcome to the channel. My name is Ryan and I'm just grateful that I get to share all of the different ways that I've tried earning money over the past couple of years in hopes that it might be able to be helpful to you in your journey and where you are right now. In this video, we're going to be breaking down wholesaling versus lending and how you might be able to make the decision on either one of those or something else that might be the best direction for you to take. So, as always, let's start with definitions. Wholesaling in real estate. Let's write it down. This is going to be the classic buy low, sell high vibe. Right? This is what everybody's really trying to do with investing. Buy low and sell high. For example, when you are talking about real estate and wholesaling, you would buy the house for $200,000 and then you would sell it for $250,000 and you would make $50,000. I know, a magical world. That's wholesaling. Now, lending gets a little bit more generic, which is part of the tough part of my day-to-day life, is trying to explain what is what. But when I talk about lending, for my purposes, because it's what I do, I'm talking about transactional lending. And transactional lending equals short-term. It means we're not lending money out for a year, 5 years, 10 years. It's usually money that's 30 days or less, short-term lending. So that's wholesaling and lending, specifically transactional lending on a micro scale, because we've talked plenty about both. Hopefully, if you're watching this video, I've been able to educate enough for you to know the difference between the two. So that's wholesaling versus lending. So determining which of these strategies is best for you, we have to look at a whole bunch of different variables. And as always, these lists that I bring up are not exhaustive by any stretch of the imagination, but I do want to bring up some lists of things that I consider in hopes, again, that it might be able to be helpful to you. So the first question I'm going to be asking is, how much time do I have? A very relative question, right? Somebody could say they have 10 minutes of free time a day and it'd be a lot. Some could say that that is not any at all, right? It just kind of depends on your perspective, which is why you're asking the question for you and not anybody else. Question number 2, we're going to be asking, what is my ultimate goal, right? When we talk about ultimate goal, we're kind of talking like end goal. Not like what is your goal for the next, month or 6 months or whatever, but what is your ultimate goal? What are you working towards? You better be working towards something or you're not going to be very motivated. The third one, what do you enjoy? Or what do I enjoy? This one gets passed over too much, right? If you thoroughly enjoy doing something that makes less money than something else, then I'm going to go ahead and say you should probably be doing that thing. So that's number 3. Number 4 is going to be, who do I know? And when I bring this up, what I'm really asking is, what are the people around you doing, right? Because by far, one of the easiest ways to learn and do anything is by copying people that are already doing it well, especially people that you have a relationship with, right? So these are the 4 questions that we're going to ask. And the answers to these questions are important, but they aren't everything. Because remember, anything works, right? Anything works, whether it's wholesaling, lending, or a million other things, right? The people that become millionaires off of selling those cones on the side of the road, anything works. I'm just talking about things that I've tried because, as always, can't talk about anything else, although some of the stuff does look pretty fun. So anything works. You can't really choose a wrong option, right? I mean, the only thing that you can do that would actually be wrong would be doing nothing. So I'm just going to try and push you into doing something, and we'll let the rest take care of itself. So to avoid talking at you guys for this whole video, let me break down these 4 questions and how I answered them personally in my own life a year ago and then how I'm answering them now, so that you can see a little bit of what I mean and how these questions can kind of, give you some direction, right? So the first question that we were talking about here is time, right? We'll put time. So at the beginning, for me, I would say that I had a decent amount of time, and what I was thinking when I was looking through this was I had a 1 to 2 hour drive every day. Yes, I drove a lot. I also had my lunch break. And then I had, post work. The 5 to 9, as some people like to call it, right? Post work. So I had a little bit of time to get this stuff done. I felt like I had time to do certain things, but time is relative to what you are trying to do, right? Because for what I was doing, I did have the time to consume, for sure, right? I had the time to listen to podcasts. I had plenty of time to do that. Listen to YouTube videos, whatever. Listen to books on tape. I also had the time to make phone calls, but here's the caveat there. I had the time to make phone calls on my time, right? So like do outreach, reach out to agents, reach out to brokers, reach out to other people doing what I wanted to do. That was how I was looking at my time. My ultimate goal. This one is probably a little bit long-winded, so I'll try and kind of make it somewhat generic. But the ultimate goal in short is freedom, which I would be willing to argue is at least one of the ultimate goals for you and pretty much anybody I know. But for me, that freedom looks like time to travel, and I'll add time to travel comfortably, because I think that's the most important factor there. And then the second one, so let's say that's number one. Second one is to run a nonprofit with money for homeless communities and I'm going to go super generic here, and youth communities. So one of the things that I'm working on right now that has been my goal is to figure out how I can be more helpful in the homeless community, both with helping feed people and anything that money can buy, right? And then also helping people get back on their feet. With youth, it's more like financial education and just trying to help people be more educated earlier on, whether that's through funding programs for like middle schools and high schools or maybe even colleges. I don't know. This stuff isn't all hashed out, but that's my ultimate goals. So yeah, putting those out there, right? The third one is, what do I enjoy? So this one I had to think about a lot, and I think that this changes significantly. But here's what I'll say. I enjoy putting in work behind the scenes. I like doing things that don't necessarily get noticed until it's, quote, too late, right? Until the thing is already happening, right? Something's already going on. So I enjoy putting in the work behind the scenes. I also like systems with scale, which I'll talk more about. And with what I like, let's add in something that I don't like for the exact opposite. I don't like any money that is one time, aka no scale, right? Basically just restating what I said before. I love scalable things. I hate things that aren't scalable, right? I knew that right from the get-go. Now, the people that I was surrounded with, this is a timeline that is ever moving, right? When I got started, I didn't know anybody, but the first people that I were introduced to were wholesalers, and I would argue that is because wholesaling, let's see if I can spell wholesalers. Wholesaling is one of the most common practices for getting into real estate because you can do it with little to no money. It's very low barrier to entry. It doesn't require a bunch of upfront capital for a lot of the different wholesaling that I see people doing, right? So I knew wholesalers. Why is that important? Because I was able to meet these wholesalers and not just, watch a video on the internet, read a book, but actually see, like physically see and witness what they were doing and replicate it. Because I'm always a huge proponent for replicating before I iterate. And so if I'm seeing these people doing something and making money, then I am very sure that I can go do the same thing and make money, right? It might look a little bit different, but if they can do it, I can do it. I have always believed that, and I think that that is absolutely true for anybody, unless there's some, hidden secret thing that is allowing them to do that. But That's not usually the case. It oftentimes feels like that, but it's not usually the case. So that was where I was when I started. Now, what did all of this lead me to do? Well, the answer to all of this was to wholesale. And when we go through it all, it makes sense. But let me tell you some reasons why making that decision may not have made the most sense for me. So if we go back up to time, right? I had a lot of drive time. I had my lunch break and I had my post-work time, right? So I had a quantity of time to get things done. However, what wholesale oftentimes requires is time when you don't expect it, or any time, right? Meaning that if I reach out to somebody, they can call me back whenever, right? If somebody wants to sell their property, they can call me whenever. All of these things require different amounts of time at random times, which is two things that I'll bring up that are negative for that. The first one is that I didn't have that random time, right? I had time, but I didn't have time necessarily specifically right at the moment that somebody was calling me or whatever it may be. That's number one, right? So that's the first hit. The second thing goes with the same thing, but it's talking about my ultimate goal, which is things like being able to travel comfortably. If I have to be on the phone, if I have to be reached at any time of day for any reason, that is going to severely inhibit my travel, right? I've done a lot of travel in places where there's not necessarily cell phone service, and even if there was, I don't want to be answering my phone for a work call when I'm trying to travel and have fun or whatever, right? So two big strikes for wholesale is the fact that it does oftentimes require me to be in a certain place at a certain time answering a certain phone call. So that's two big strikes. The other thing, systems that scale. This one really hit home for me the more that I wholesale. Now, a lot of you guys know, because I talked about on this channel, the fact that I was wholesaling on market deals with agents. I'm going to go ahead and put it out there that wholesaling in this way is not very scalable. Now, I can't get fully in depth on KPIs, which is key performance indicators, which is how you track your business and what you are doing. But KPIs are incredibly not helpful when you are working with agents, because KPIs are something that can be kind of looked at as a common theme, right? Something that you can replicate. And the problem is, in my business and in the businesses of a lot of people I knew, those KPIs never really seemed to balance out, because the people that we were working with were too sporadic, and a lot of things that we did revolved around laws and prices and things that were changing. Side note on this, if you're wholesaling cash deals, which is something I wasn't doing, those KPIs are very trackable and do work in recessions and in booming times as well. So it's a whole different thing, right? But I'm just talking about my experience, right? So that was the things that I did not realize wouldn't work, was things like having systems at scale, also money that is one time, right? Because it was an unscalable business, or it wasn't a fully scalable business, the money would come in, which was great, but because my ultimate goal is to be able to have these funds to help people out and whatever, I just don't think that way, right? I don't think in the way of like, oh, I'm so glad that we made this one chunk of money. I'm thinking, how can we make money perpetually forever? And if it doesn't fit in with that, then it's not necessarily going to be the best thing for me. And then obviously I did know wholesalers, right? And so I chose the easy route, which is only working with the people that I already had a relationship with, right? That were already wholesaling, that I could already learn from. Now, here's what I changed on these 4 points. Let's say, what changed? So I started to notice these things, right? And this, I think, is a very important lesson for you all, is that if you try something, it does not mean that you have to do that thing forever, right? You can switch it up. Pay attention to what's going on. So what changed for me? Well, for number one, it's what I just said. I realized my time situation. I realized what was changing there and what was going to make it work better. Number two, I realized my need for flexibility. Keep in mind, this is before I've made any decisions. This is just kind of like taking note of what's going on, right? The third one, I wanted scale and systems, probably mainly because I was an engineer at the time, and so I enjoyed building that kind of thing, right? I like numbers, I like math, I know it's weird, whatever. And then number four, what I realized is I can meet other people. Kind of obvious, but it's something that I want to point out, and maybe even a tip that I can give is, if you only know people in one field, then that is a great option, right, to go replicate. But your other option is seek people that are crushing it in what you want to do. And that is another great option. And that is the option that I ended up going towards once I realized that it was even possible, right? So I realized all of these things in my business that didn't fit for me with wholesaling. They didn't fit for me, right? And so I switched over to lending. Now, why did I switch over to lending? Why didn't I switch over to selling the cones on the side of the road, right? Because of number 4, right? Because I met these people. I started meeting people, reading, seeing videos, hearing stories of people that were lending, and I took lending along with a lot of other things, right? Other things that I got into and considered were different types of wholesaling, buying multifamily properties, buying single-family properties. I started hearing all of these different things, so I was adding variables into my equation, and when I was adding those variables in, I was doing the same evaluation process that I'm talking about. I was evaluating those different things, trying to figure out, okay, I now have new information. How can I take this information to reform my ideas, reform what I want to be doing, and figure out what's going to work best for me now, given this new information, right? Information change, my actions change. Makes sense. So I took the information I knew and I saw different things like the buying houses and all that. And I knew that my ultimate goal was to get to work on scalable businesses that had systems behind the scenes that I enjoyed. And that led me to lending. So I wanted to give you guys the behind the scenes of how I actually got there, right? This is real world, the last year and a half for me of decisions that I've made, things that I'm still constantly learning, and decisions that I am still making to this day that led me to lending. Because for me, lending is flexible, right? So for number 1, on the time side of things, lending for me was more flexible. Why was it more flexible? Because it uses more automation. So a vast majority of my business now is run off of button leads, right? Button leads has my website set up. It has my forms. It keeps all of my people in one place. It follows up with them. It sends them contracts. It does all of that stuff. So that automation allows me to be more flexible because I don't have to be right there, right then at a specific time. And that has been a huge boost in my business. It's allowed me to be more focused. It's allowed me to do other things. I'm so grateful to be able to do that, right? Number 2 is that it is, in my opinion, it is infinitely, let's do the infinity, infinitely scalable. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I'll get other videos talking specifically on the breakdowns of the different types of lending I do, but I talk about EMD lending all the time, and I'll just say that EMD lending, if I went and lent on a $500,000 EMD right now, which would be, let's say, what would that be? A $50 million purchase would be 1% EMD, $500,000, right? If I were to go lend on a $500,000 EMD, I could make plus $200,000, right? Pretty significant money, right? That would be multiple years of my work with a salary. Now, here's the crazy part. That lending right there would take me the same amount of time as lending for $5,000. The same amount of time, like literally zero extra time for $5,000 versus $500,000. So 100x the profits for the same amount of time. And to me, I consider that to be basically infinite scalability because it means that my time can now be valued vastly higher without doing anything different, just by creating better opportunities. And that fit very well with what I was trying to do, even though obviously it's not just going to land in my lap. Now, the third one is that it was much more systems-based. I'll say that's number 1 because the second one is that less people do it. Now, this is intriguing to me because I kind of like forging my own path, right? I like coming up with new stuff, trying things people haven't done before, trying to figure it out and then teach other people. It's kind of the whole point of this YouTube channel, is to do stuff like that. And so that was very appealing to me. Whereas there's a lot of people that are like, yeah, I don't have the time or the stamina or whatever, or the desire to want to go do that stuff. Totally fair, totally makes sense, but that's why I enjoyed it. And then number 4, like I said, I just met lenders. And to me, and I aim to do this for you guys and for other people, to me, the whole goal is to just see other people succeeding in what you want to do, because all it takes is that little switch to understand that it's possible. And that's what I wanted to do for you guys, and that's what other people were able to do for me, that I'm so grateful for. But as you can see, I ended up choosing lending. Now, the story doesn't end there, because choosing that lending was not like a flick of the switch, right? I show you guys all of the things that make sense. Keep in mind, I'm speaking in hindsight, right? Like, I'm speaking in hindsight here about the things that I did. This stuff didn't just all happen at once. Not at all, right? So, I chose lending, but I didn't actually choose it as my focus right off the bat, because I was too scared that it wasn't going to work, or I was too scared that it wasn't going to be what I thought it might be, right? Does that sound familiar? Too scared to go after something, especially if there's not as much of a paved path. I mean, that's definitely how I felt. And so it took multiple people, not named Ryan, to convince me to finally go all in on it earlier this year and quit wholesaling and some of the other things that I was doing to actually focus on what mattered the most and what made the most sense for me. So what I will say to you guys is, take the time to evaluate your situation, right? Not mine, not somebody else's, yours. And keep in mind when you're evaluating it that those things will change over time, and that is totally okay. So take time to evaluate your situation. Don't discount the fact that if other people are doing it, you may very well have a smoother runway, right? If you want to do what everyone else is doing, that is totally fine, because it does not matter how you make money in real estate. It just matters that you are making money so that you can get closer to whatever the heck your goal is. Unless your goal is to not make money, but then these videos probably won't be that helpful for you. So it doesn't matter how you do it. And I want you guys to go ahead and leave me a comment below on what you're thinking. Like, what are you working towards, and how can I help you make the decision between lending or wholesaling or buying or doing something completely unrelated to real estate, if that's even possible for me to be helpful with that. Leave me a comment. I want to hear from you guys. And don't forget, whether it's lending, wholesaling, or making some dang candles, everything will work if you don't quit. So I hope this video was helpful, maybe gave you a little bit of insight towards making that decision, and I will see you guys on the next video. Peace.